Morning, everyone. Today, I want to talk to you about tips for how to run a marathon and survive. So it's Tuesday morning, and as always on Tuesdays, I talk about all things running, and this is something that is quite close to my heart, today's topic, because having run 4 marathons, I've hit the wall twice because I got my race plan wrong, and I've run 2 PBs. Well, obviously not hugely impressive, but my first one was, I think my first PB was 3 hours 43, and then my current PB is 3 hours 38. So not hugely impressive, but it is super impressive. The previous 2 were over 4 hours and hit the wall on both of them. So the reason why I want to talk to you about this today is that for me the marathon distance is the ultimate distance. I've done 4 ultra marathons as well as I've talked about before, and I think the problem with marathons is, generally speaking, people will try and get a time. And not everyone, some people just try and finish, which is absolutely an amazing achievement regardless. But when you get into running, you start getting caught into the time trap and the competitiveness side of things. And it might be that you want to just get around, like when you break 6 hours, 5 hours, 4 hours, and there's quite a few that will try and break 3 hours. But people do seem to understand what a time means for the marathon distance, which puts added pressure on. Whereas when you do ultra marathons, nobody really cares about the time. It's just, oh my word, you did a massive distance, and focus on the distance. So whatever time you did it in, I know people that are ultra marathon runners, but they'll probably walk 90% of the ultra marathon. Doesn't mean they've not covered the distance, so kudos to them for finishing. But if you do a marathon and you say, oh, I did it in whatever time, people kind of have a perception and understanding of what pace you're doing that in. Now, it's not to say that it's right or wrong, but I find personally, I'm super competitive, that when you run a marathon, you're kind of leaving everything out there to try and get that best time, because people understand a bit more about the distance. And having hit the wall on 2 occasions, there's quite a lot of learned from that, and hopefully I can give you a few tips, a few pointers that will help you make your first running, or your however many marathons you've already done, or whether it's your first, a more enjoyable experience, because it is an unbelievable achievement. And I say this, one of the biggest mistakes I made, so mistake number 1, the first marathon I ever ran was the London Marathon, which is it's the single biggest marathon event in the world. I know that in terms of numbers, I think New York's got more, but it's the most iconic marathon. It's London Marathon, the biggest single fundraising event in the world. I think my last year's marathon raised over £1 billion in a day, which is absolutely staggering. But the issue was that it's such a big event, you can't help but, for many of us, it'll probably be the closest we ever feel to being a professional athlete. And the crowd are all cheering your names, a million spectators. So it's a truly epic event. The downside of it, if you've never run a marathon before, and you get caught up in all the hype, the adrenaline, the crowd cheering you, all this, your race plan will go out the window. And that's exactly what happened in my first ever marathon. I think I did my first marathon, I think the first 10k of that marathon was not even a quarter of the way round. I was running it, I think I got around the first 10k in just over 45 minutes. So I was running at kind of 7.5 minute mile pace. Now, I wasn't fit, I wasn't in shape to do that, and my heart rate was at such a high level, I ended up crashing and burning. And I remember distinctively feeling it after about 7.5 miles, thinking, not sure I should be feeling it like this. And trust me, it was the longest 19 miles or so of my life when you're feeling it. Added to that, the first London Marathon I ever did, which was 2018, was the hottest London Marathon on record. I think the track temperature was measured at about 33 degrees centigrade. So heat exhaustion as well. It was You know, that was the worst wall I've ever hit. I collapsed with heat exhaustion on the finish line. So it shows how bad it really was. So rule number one, try and pick, if it's your first marathon, try and pick a bit of a low-key event to obviously experience what it takes to run a marathon, but without the distractions of running a major event, because it's, like I say, it's super distracting, and it will take you off your race plan. Number two, go past some people here. Morning. Number two is have a race plan. Now, pretty obvious. The only analogy I can think of here is when you're going to, if you've had children, your wife and yourself, or your husband, whoever, you will have a birthing plan, and it'll probably be quite meticulous in terms of what you're hoping the process will be, and hoping how it will all go. And a bit like a birthing plan, a marathon you can have the best plans, and they can all go horribly wrong very quickly, depending on a multitude of things. But the point is you can eliminate a lot of the risks by having a robust plan. So what I mean by a plan is, obviously, this can link to your training. Know what your level of fitness is, know what your target is, whether it's your objective is just to get around or whether it's to hit time, and try and have use your training to give you that kind of understanding and strategy for what you're going to do on the day. Like I say, I was going for my first ever London Marathon. I think I was going for sub 3:45, but when I was running at 7:15 to 7.5 minute mile pace at the early stages, I was never ever going to achieve that because I was exerting myself too much. And it sounds easy to look back on it, but the distractions of London Marathon is what caused that. So if I talk you through my plan, okay, as everybody knows, I'm an avid heart rate tracker or heart rate training runner. So I know all my heart rates. I did a really cool episode on heart rate training simplified. Hopefully some of you find that really useful. The key figure here is my math zone. And I know that my math zone, I tip over from fat burning zone into, carbohydrate burning zone at 146 beats per minute. So I know that if I run below that, I'm still using fat as an energy supply efficiently. You will still burn a little bit of fat the faster you go, but it takes longer to process. I've got a couple of dogs trying to savage me here. Hopefully they don't savage me. Ooh. God, they look vicious, don't they? Cheers, mate. Lost my train of thought now. But yeah, my math zone is 146. So you will build, so all my training was primarily done in that zone because it increases my body's ability to use fat as an energy source, which you won't run out of because even the skinniest people out there got about 77,000 calories worth of fat stored in their body. It's just a lot harder to burn it down and process it as an energy supply, which is why often people generally use carbohydrates as their energy source. Enough about the science anyway. Now I train at that level, and they always say when you train slower than you do on marathon day because the adrenaline, and everything on marathon day means you'll be running quicker. And believe you me, it does help with all the energy gels and stuff you're taking as well. Makes a big difference. So my marathon plan is very simple. I run at 10 beats. I try and stay at least no more than 10 beats a minute above my math zone. Morning. So what I mean by that is that I'm running at 155 beats per minute from the start. So the reason running to heart rate is better is because if you run to pace, what a lot of people do, they'll train all the time, they'll know what the average pace is, but they can't factor in kind of environmental conditions like how hot it is, how sunny it is, how hydrated you are, how fueled you are, all these such things. Where your heart rate will track against all of that and give you a real accurate reading of your actual effort, which is ultimately what we're going to determine whether you hit the wall or not. If you burn too much too quickly and you don't replenish, you'll hit the wall. Ultimately, what's going to happen. So I know that if I run 155 beats per minute, and I'll try and maintain that for half a marathon. If I go a little bit faster, my heart rate spikes up, I'll drop my pace down and learn to breathe deeply. So now that is really deep breaths to gain more oxygen into my system, and in combination with running slower, it'll bring my heart rate down. It's quite a difficult skill to master, but practice when you're on your training runs. You know, you can put a bit of a spurt of activity and your heart rate will spike very quickly. But at the same time, go slower, breathe deeply and try and pull it back down. So you've got to try and control that because that's the exertion levels on your body. So I'm just going to turn around here because I'm a bit more sad. I don't want the traffic taking over from my audio. So I try and run first half marathon to 155. Now, there's a term called heart rate lag. Now, no matter how good you are at managing your heart rate, when your muscles start fatiguing and you start, you know, because again, bear in mind, I'm in the carbohydrate burning zone. So as my energy levels start reducing, my heart rate will work harder. And that's called heart rate lag. And it happens later into runs. So I can normally hold 155 till about half marathon. And then generally between half marathon and 20 miles, I'm trying to stick it at 160. It's generally where I'm trying to keep my heart rate. So I've measured this and I know that I can maintain this pace for the whole course. So I'm not looking at pace at all. And if you train well enough at this, you'll know pretty much what pace you'll be running at based on your heart rate. So that's something that you need to practice to kind of find out. But then as soon as I get to 20 miles, I'm up to kind of lagged up to 165. And then it's just manage whatever you can just to get around the last 10k. Okay, which is easier said than done. But that strategy means I don't overexert myself in the early stages of the race. And I normally can nurse myself around the last 10k if I'm really struggling. And so that's my race plan, that's how I do it. If you want to follow that strategy, work out your math zone, go back to a previous episode I did on heart rate, and 10 beats a minute higher than your math zone. Okay, so mine was 146, so I'm saying, 9 bits ahead, 155, and then lagging up to 160, 165, and then it's a free-for-all from there. So that's my strategy. If you want to follow that, please do so and let me know whether it works for you or it doesn't. The caveat to this is that it's very much dependent on everybody's unique and everybody's personal. Some things work for others, some things don't work for other people. So you just need to factor that in. But that's why it's really important to kind of practice and testing the stuff. So that's really, really key. The next thing is what somebody who's run on over 100 marathons told me. But for once I did actually listen to this. This was after I'd hit the wall for the second time. He just said, you know what? You don't get your marathon time the first half marathon. You don't get the marathon time in the first 20 miles. The race starts at 20 miles. And your objective is to get to the 20-mile marker as efficiently as possible, conserving energy whilst maintaining yourself in line with whatever your target outcome is. If you do that, the race is won or lost in terms of what you're trying to achieve in the last 10k. I'd go one step beyond that and say that it can even be the last 5k. Because when I've hit the wall before, my first London Marathon, I remember the last 5k going down the embankment. It is the most supported area. It's probably 20 deep either side on a kind of a stepped system, screaming your name, and they always go for the underdog. So they see me struggling, limp walking basically. Well, I was jogging, but it was a kind of walking pace. They give me so much support. I was so embedded in the wall that I couldn't see. I was tunnel visioned. My eyes, I couldn't hear properly. It sounded like I was in a bottle. People were screaming, and I could just about hear the crowd, but I couldn't hear what they were saying, what they were doing. So I was completely delirious, you know. And that's why I say that the last 5k was the longest run of my life. I won the marathon my first attempt. So let that be a lesson and try and understand that. Race begins at 20 miles or even 23 miles, and nurse your way to there to have a chance of winning your time. The next thing is to have prepared correctly. So obviously, I've talked about training plans, different types of training you can do. Talked about heart rate and how I use heart rate. Talked about Tanda, which is my preferred way of training. So look that up if you haven't seen that video, that episode. Really, really cool. Hopefully it will help you. And nutrition is the next most important thing. If you don't fuel correctly, it will come back and get you without a shadow of a doubt. Fueling and hydrating. I did a separate episode on that as well. So go back and watch that to get tips on how you can fuel more effectively. So important. So hopefully those things will give you the tools you need to get around the marathon in one piece. because I've always been pretty fit all through my life. And when I say pretty fit, short, sharp stuff like football, basketball, squash, these types of things, never an issue. Endurance events are a completely different ballgame, and if you take them for granted or you get complacent, they punish you like nothing else will punish you. And if I can get any of you to avoid that experience, I would. That makes this whole vlog worthwhile. So take this information and hopefully try and apply it to your training if marathons are what you want to do. And the same applies for half marathons. Generally speaking, you can normally do up to kind of 9 miles without really having to consider fueling for most people. I can normally do up to half marathon without worrying about fuel. But for half marathon, I'm always taking my nutrition more seriously. And that's kind of the threshold you want to consider. So, hope the tips here. So just to summarise really quickly, try and pick a low-key event if it's your first ever marathon, because the distractions of an event like London, I was high-fiving the crowd that first 10k. Believe you me, you don't realise how much energy that takes. It might sound silly, but I wasn't high-fiving them after 10k, that's for sure. So run a low-key event in the first marathon. Second is have a race plan or a marathon plan. Treat it like a bit like a birthing plan. Attention to detail. You should know all this, practice all this in your training. So make sure that you're trusting and measuring things. The next one is make sure you've got a nutrition plan all set up and lined up, ready to go. And I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, really, really important to take these tips and implement them into your training if marathon's what you want to achieve. So if you found this useful, and as always, please like, share, comment if you think this is good value. As always, I will respond to every comment. If it's a bigger topic, I will do a separate blog post and I'll tag you in. But yeah, my favourite mantra as well. Stay positive, stay happy, and I will see you on the next episode.